webinar. We're so happy to be back up and running. We had a little hiatus with some technical issues with Webinar Jam, but everything seems to be worked out. My name is Leisha Getson, and I will be your host tonight. Before we begin, just a little housekeeping. Tonight's presentation will be about 45 minutes, followed by Q&A. You should be able to hear me and the speaker as well as follow along with the PowerPoint presentation. To the right of your screen, you will see a chat box. If you have a question, type it in and submit it. We'll get to as many questions as possible at the end of the presentation. If we don't get to a question, you can forward it in an email to us at tdi@comcast.net, or perhaps to our speaker, who will be providing an email address if she wants to answer questions in that way. If for some reason you get cut off from the webinar, you may be able to log back in and fast forward to catch up with us. But if not, don't worry. The webinar will be archived within a day or two on our website and available on YouTube. So it's my great pleasure to introduce our speaker tonight. I'm very excited to hear what she has to say. Our speaker is Wendy Beth Rosen, and she will be talking about her book, The Hidden Link Between Vision and Learning: Why Millions of Learning Disabled Children Are Misdiagnosed. Just a little bit of information about that. It says many symptoms of vision-related learning problems can mimic other conditions. There are consequently countless numbers of children who are classified as special education students or are medicated or both, who may be wrongly diagnosed. Few people are aware that a breakdown in a visual system can be at the core of a learning disability. As an education consultant specializing in vision-related learning problems, metacognition, and environmental education. A certified early childhood and elementary teacher with extensive classroom experience, she has also taught in experiential education settings as a nature specialist, a marine field instructor, and an educational farmer. And I just love all of that, Wendy. That is quite a interesting and diverse background that you have. So welcome this evening. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Leisha, so much for that lovely intro and for inviting me to do this webinar, and to all of you for tuning in. I am thrilled to have this opportunity to talk about this critical subject, which impacts many, but is actually understood by few. I learned about this as a parent. When my daughter was in second grade, she began to struggle in school. She was struggling to finish her work, and the teacher was sending it home to be completed for homework, along with all the other homework she had to do. Her handwriting regressed. It was better in kindergarten than it was in second grade, which is not the way it's supposed to go, as we know. And she was overall less enthusiastic about school, which was not like her. She always loved school. So we did not really know what to make of this. We plodded through the year, watching and hoping that things would kind of resolve on their own. But third grade came, and her symptoms worsened. Her stress level increased, along with her frustration. And she and we hit a wall. So, not knowing what to make of this, we decided to go through the child study team evaluation process, because we thought perhaps there was some obscure learning issue that was not readily identifiable in the classroom. And I, of course, being her mom, couldn't be objective about what was going on. So we started down this road. And the evaluation results showed that Sarah scored in the average to high average range in all areas except for one. And this was an assessment that required her to repeat a pattern of symbols, and she did very poorly on this. But it was also discovered that Sarah was writing at the level of a first grader, both her handwriting and written expression, 2 grade levels below where she should be. So as a result of this, she qualified for special education services, and Sarah became a classified student.
Wow.
Yeah.
Very, very difficult.
It was a very trying time, and we were confused. The child study team could not offer any explanation as to why Sarah had this writing deficiency. We were curious about what was behind it, but when we asked the questions, they couldn't provide any answers. So we decided to follow up privately with a psychologist to get a second opinion. And when we showed her the results of Sarah's evaluation, she immediately saw a connection between the low patterning score in that assessment and her writing deficiency. And she said together, these two indicators were significant, and she felt that Sarah may have a vision problem. And I said, well, that's interesting that you say that, because Sarah's been coming home from school complaining of headaches, and I thought we should take her to the eye doctor to get an eye exam because maybe she needed eyeglasses.
Mm-hmm.
So taking all of this into account, she recommended that we see a behavioral optometrist. And we said, what's a behavioral optometrist?
That was my question. What's a behavioral optometrist? Yes.
Exactly. Right. And many of you may have the same question.
Right.
So we learned that this is a subspecialty of optometry, and these optometrists have had a follow-up training, postdoctoral training, and specialize in diagnosing and treating visual and perceptual problems that can affect learning. So off we went, and we came out of our first office visit that day astonished to learn that Sarah was seeing double.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And so we of course we were surprised. We couldn't believe that this was going on, and she needed to have some further evaluation worked up. So we went back for more of this, and the results of this evaluation showed that she was also deficient in several other areas. That she had several other visual deficiencies. And one of them was called a visual motor integration problem, and this was the cause of her writing deficiency. So we had the answer to what was going on, but we weren't really sure about this whole vision piece. What was this, and why had we never heard of it? We'd never heard of this? So it was recommended that Sarah go through a regimen of something called vision therapy, which she did, and she came through this process completely rehabilitated.
Wow.
All of her visual deficiencies were corrected. She was subsequently declassified.
Wow.
She went on to become a thriving student. She graduated from high school with high honors as a member of the National Honor Society,
Wow.
and she is now a thriving college senior.
Wow.
So
that's just amazing.
Yeah, that's the short story. Her story is actually the preface of the book, and it's laid out in much greater detail because it was just a fascinating experience. I still cannot read her story. These are my own words, but I still cannot read it without getting chills.
Oh, of course,
and just a dozen years later.
Thank goodness you and your husband had the persistence or the faculty of mind to be able to get her to the right place and get this proper diagnosis.
Right. And so, but the interesting thing is, so first of all, I can't imagine how Sarah would be today if we had not stumbled onto this knowledge 12 years ago. And we felt extremely grateful that we discovered the root of her struggles. But you know what? We were lucky. We just happened to consult with someone who knew about this.
Yeah.
I learned much later on that this is not always the case. Now, as a teacher, I was astonished that I had never heard of these types of learning problems. This was a remarkable life-changing experience for my daughter, but it was for me as well. And it launched me onto a path of independent research where I quickly learned that 1 in 4 children have a vision problem that affects learning.
Wow.
1 in 4 children are going through this.
Astounding. Can you just repeat? You said she had double vision, but then you also said that the diagnosis was.
It was convergence insufficiency. And I'm going to talk about that a little later on.
Okay.
But basically, her eyes were not able to team properly and focus on one image. They were looking in 2 different places and consequently sending 2 images to the brain, which is why she was seeing double.
Oh, wow.
Right.
Okay.
So I'm going to go into this a little bit more later in our presentation.
Okay.
So the 1 in 4 kids is a staggering statistic. I continued with my research, and then I began doing outreach education about this and facilitating professional development workshops for teachers and child study teams and school administrators, because everyone who works with children needs to know about this.
Absolutely.
And because getting children the help they need shouldn't come down to luck.
No.
Because it doesn't for countless kids.
Yeah.
So this, in a nutshell, is why I wrote this book.
And thank goodness you did. May I ask, were the people that you were doing the lecturing to or teaching, were they open to this? Was it well received?
Very. It was, there was always an electricity in the air towards the end of the presentation where the teachers got it and they said, oh my goodness, this is incredible. And they asked the same questions I did. Why don't we know about this? And oh my goodness, they can think of, kids in their class who were struggling and they've gone through every evaluation that, is in the book and nothing could explain what was going on. And so they were getting help, but they were still struggling and they were thinking to themselves and then out loud to me, I bet it's this.
Wow.
So, yeah.
That is amazing.
It's very, very powerful information.
Very powerful, very powerful.
So my goal tonight is for you to come away from this presentation informed about what vision-related learning problems are and how they can affect a child's learning and behavior. And I'm also going to equip you with resources so you can explore this further.
Great.
Okay. Now, I just want to mention that while this may sound like a very clinical subject, I've written this book in clear language because it is for everyone, including, but not limited to, parents, teachers, pediatricians, psychologists, guidance counselors, child study teams, school administrators, lawyers who specialize in education matters, especially special education, as well as educational policymakers. In truth, really everyone whose life touches a child's.
Right.
So let's begin by talking about what vision really is. And to do so, let's first talk about the difference between vision and eyesight. Often, these terms are used interchangeably, but really, they're quite different. So, eyesight is the physiological ability to receive input through the eyes. Vision is the ability to understand what the input is. Vision actually happens in the brain. So, let's demonstrate this. Are you ready?
Okay, ready, yeah.
All right. I've just put up an image here for you to look at. And I'd like you to take a few moments to try and figure out what this is a picture of. Now, I want to point out that what you are doing right now, as you are looking at it, is using your eyesight. Okay?
Okay, yeah.
Your eyes are taking information in about what you see in this image and sending this information to your brain. Now,
Okay.
your brain might have figured it out already, and you might think you know what this is a picture of, or you might be saying, what the heck?
Yeah. I'm about there. What the heck is it? I'm feeling like, oh, I should know what this is, but
Exactly,
I'm
exactly.
struggling a little
No,
here.
actually, no, not necessarily.
Okay.
So don't feel bad
Okay.
because we're meeting here in webinar world and
Right.
we have limited time tonight, I will fast forward through your processing time a little bit
Okay.
and tell you that this is a picture of a cow. It really is.
Okay. All right. All right. Backing up
Now,
my chair a little bit to see if I can see it better.
that may help. That may help.
Yes.
I didn't see it at first either when I was first shown this picture.
Okay.
So now don't feel badly if you didn't see it right away, or if you're having trouble seeing a cow even now, though you've been told what it is, because it is meant to be almost undetectable.
Okay, good.
Some people see it right away, and some people don't.
All right.
So I'm going to walk you through it. Okay,
Right.
let's look at the bottom of the image, and just off the center to the left at the bottom, you'll see a dark, sort of blobbish looking shape. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
that is the cow's nose. Okay, so we're at the bottom, just
Right.
to the left. And if you go up from there, if you move your eyes up from there, you will see above that, a little further out towards each side, two smaller shapes. The one on the left is pretty round. The one on the right, not so much. Those are the cow's eyes.
I see it.
Oh, I love when the
I
light bulb goes. Isn't that
I
great?
just saw it.
I was
Sorry.
making
Okay.
everybody else's light bulb go off because, it's so cool, right?
Oh,
So
wow.
I'm going to go a little further and explain the rest of the image. So if you go up just a little bit more and out from the eyes, you'll see the ears. The one on the left is, it looks pretty much like an ear. The one on the right is hard to detect because it blends in with the black background. Okay. So this cow, I'm just going to orient you. This cow is standing with its body facing our left, and it's turning its head to its left so that it's facing us. Does that make sense?
Yes, yes.
Okay, so that whole white area that takes up about 2/3 of the right side of this image, that's the left side of the cow's body. Do you see what I mean now?
Yes, I do. I do.
Okay,
Yes.
great. All right, there we go. So
That's fascinating.
it is, right? So now, hopefully, you all understand the information your eyes have taken in through your eyesight, and now you have acquired vision.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so this is a little, example illustrating how this works, and the difference between eyesight and vision and what the function is. And so now whenever you look at this image, you will see the cow because your brain now understands the information.
It recognizes it now.
Exactly, how the lines and shapes and shading coordinate in this image of a cow, albeit a very obscure one. Okay?
Yes.
All right.
Wow.
So,
Very interesting.
So vision actually involves more than 24 skills that we use every day, many of which we have never even heard of. These lesser known skills help us all navigate our way through life, basically. But they are critical to a child's overall development and especially academic achievement and even the quality of life. 80% of the neurological pathways in the brain connect with the visual system. 80%.
Wow.
This is more than all the other sensory areas combined. So we get an incredible amount of information about the world through our vision. So let's begin to get to get to know these skills a little bit. I'm going to pull up one of two charts here for you, which categorizes the visual skills. These skills that you see mostly on this first slide have to do with our visual efficiency, how well we can take in information. And I'm not going to go into all of them tonight because of time and for the sake of efficiency, but I just wanted you to know that they are all defined very clearly in the book, along with examples of how they play out in our lives. But I do want to touch on a few of them just to give you a sense of what they are and how they work for us and help us function in ways that we may not realize. Okay, so the very first one, visual acuity, that we may have heard of. That's a more familiar term for some, perhaps. But this is what we mean when we're talking about how clearly we see at a certain distance. And being nearsighted or farsighted can affect our visual acuity. Okay, as astigmatism. All right. Let's move down to peripheral vision. And again, this is another very familiar term, and I think we know in many ways how we use our peripheral vision, but I want to mention how it's used in a learning context and why it's so important for kids, really anybody, but certainly for kids in a learning context. So when we use our peripheral vision, when we read, what we're doing is our eyes are actually scoping out what comes next as we're reading, so that we can read along that line of print smoothly and with efficiency. Okay? If peripheral vision is not working as it should, we're only able to see exactly what's in front of us, and it's going to slow down our reading process tremendously. When this happens, it's sometimes called tunnel vision, which maybe some have heard of. That's another term that maybe is a little bit more familiar, because it's like you're only able to see directly what's in front of you, not off to either side. Okay, so I'm going to skip ahead to the next slide, and these visual skills listed here have a lot more to do with processing. And I'm going to talk about laterality, which is the first one listed under visual spatial skills. This is a fascinating one. It's basically learning our left from our right in our own body, within the space of our own body, and in relation to the space around us and our surroundings. And this skill, learning our left from our right, being proficient with that, which happens hopefully very early on in our development, this forms the underpinnings of later being able to learn to decode letters and read.
Really? Wow.
Yes. So visual skills actually develop and function within the context of our whole body, not just our eyes and not even just our heads. It's all connected. Okay.
Can I just ask you a question regarding that?
Yes.
People who have a problem telling left from right, is that a problem with this laterality?
Yes, it could be. It depends, on the context, but yes. This can play out in other ways besides vision. So in terms of a visual context, I would say yes. And I would be curious to know how that impacts them in other ways, especially with regard to vision. Because again, it all connects.
Right.
Yeah. So let's jump down to the next category under vision perception. We're going to talk about visual sequential memory. Basically, this is going to make total sense when I say it. This is how we remember phone numbers.
Oh, okay.
Remembering things in a sequence. Let's talk about visual figure ground too, the last one in that category. This is a fun one to explain. So figure ground skills involve us being able to focus in on information we need and ignore the surrounding information that we don't need. And I'm going to give you two examples of how this plays out in our lives. You're looking for your keys in a drawer full of stuff. A lot of stuff, okay? And you've got to find your keys because you have to get to a meeting and you don't want to be late. So being able to focus on the characteristics of what your keys look like in the context of your drawer with all that other stuff surrounding your keys is using figure ground skills, being able to tune out all that other irrelevant stuff and just find your keys in that. Okay? The way it can play out with learning is if you are looking for certain information in a text and you are, say, skimming a text looking for that information, being able to ignore, again, all the information that is irrelevant and focus on just what you need. You're using your figure ground skills in that situation, okay? And yeah, and again, these are all defined. All these skills are defined in the book with examples, and it's really, really fascinating. You know, we don't. I think it's just incredible. We don't realize how we function. You know, it's like I want us all to have a user's manual so we can understand all of this. It's just so so interesting and important. So that last skill, automaticity, the goal. This is the goal of all our visual skills combined, which is for visual processing to occur efficiently and optimally with minimal effort. Okay?
Okay.
So now, when one or more of these skills are faulty, our ability to function is compromised. And we are often not even aware that this is happening. When this occurs in a child, they may have an unrecognized vision problem that can greatly affect their ability to learn and succeed in school and in other areas of their life. And it's interesting to know that vision-related learning problems can affect every child. Those outwardly struggling the most, where it's more obvious, to those who actually may be at the top of the class. So, for example, depending on a child's inner resources, as well as the degree and the number of deficits they have, some kids may be able to compensate better than others. But just because a child is getting all A's and they seem to be sailing along, it doesn't mean they may not have a hidden vision problem. They just may actually be working much harder than they would normally need to.
Right.
Okay. Now, astoundingly, despite the fact that vision-related learning problems affect 1 in 4 school-age children, the number of people equipped with knowledge about these types of vision problems is enormously inadequate. And consequently, many children are not receiving the correct diagnosis and the help that they need. Deficits in any one or a combination of these areas can make it difficult for a child to keep up with learning, and it can decrease the stamina that they need to complete assignments. And stress, frustration, and fatigue will set in for a child, which is just the tip of the iceberg. Okay, stress on a child's sensory system can bring about a multitude of symptoms. And here you go. This is an abbreviated list.
Wow.
Okay.
Riding uphill or downhill. How interesting. Yes. Tilts head. Wow.
Yep. And as I said, this is an abbreviated list. In the book, there is a thorough listing of all the symptoms, and they are correlated with each visual skill, and they are listed in great detail. So you can, reference that if there's something specific you're experiencing or observing in a child.
So, for instance, riding uphill or downhill is correlated with a particular visual skill.
Correct.
And that's all. So that's all explained. Okay.
Right. Now, knowing that these symptoms can be indicators of the presence of a possible vision disorder, and that we need to be able to recognize these symptoms as such, would be a game changer. It really would. But unfortunately, these problems are seldom on the radar of those who evaluate our children. Okay, we're going to touch on that a little bit more later, but it's again, this knowledge is not widespread, and it needs to be.
Yes.
So I want to discuss convergence insufficiency in greater detail. Before you had asked me about it, and I said we'd get to it. So this is the condition that I mentioned earlier, and I'm going to call it CI for short. And I'm going to tell you what this condition is. So normally, with normal binocular vision, our eyes should work as a team, and they should come together. They should be able to work together and focus on one place and send one image to the brain. When a child has CI, okay, they're not able to do that. Their eyes are not functioning as a team. And as a result, they're looking at two different places, and they're sending two different images. I'm sorry, they're sending two images to the brain. Okay? Now, our vision is responsible for 80% of the information that we learn. And when a child has CI, the brain tries to cope with conflicting information coming in two ways. Okay?
All right.
Now, the first way it copes is by simply clamoring to make sense of all that information. But this is very stressful. And in doing so, it reduces the percent of information a child is able to process to 50%.
Wow.
50. Okay, that's a dramatic drop.
Wow.
Right?
Yes.
Okay, so when all this clamoring becomes too difficult for the brain, it will take more drastic measures to try to cope. And it will actually shut down one eye.
Wow.
Now, the child won't necessarily realize that they are seeing out of only one eye, but this is the case. And when this occurs, the percentage of information a child is able to process is reduced to 20%.
Wow. Oh my God.
Okay?
Wow.
Can you, right, exactly. Now, it's very
mind-blowing.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
Wow.
Now, it is very stressful and exhausting for a child with CI trying to function in school. Okay? Oftentimes, kids will instinctively try to relieve their stress by distracting themselves. They may look away from their work, or they may look out the window, because looking far away brings some relief from having to focus up close. They may cause a distraction or be a distraction. They may ask to leave the room often for bathroom breaks, water breaks, going to the nurse. Really, they're just trying to cope with a very uncomfortable situation. Okay?
Wow.
Now, remember that these behaviors that I just described can often be associated with attention issues.
Yes.
So that is why it is so important to know about the vision piece. Okay? So to try to imagine how this feels to a child.
Yes.
Actually, I'm going to help you get a first-hand feel for how this feels to a child. Try reading this.
Oh.
Okay, this is a spelling list. This slide was made out of two transparencies with the same text on it. And when I'm fortunate enough to have access to an overhead projector, remember those?
Yes, yes.
One of my favorite tools.
Vaguely, yes, I remember them.
Okay,
Yes.
so when I do these presentations for teachers, and if there's an overhead available, I'll use my transparencies, and I'll put this on the overhead and put it up there on the screen. And when I have that ability, and there's probably a way to do it on the computer, but I don't know how to do it. What I will do with these is move them a little bit, because this is what will happen for a child as they're trying to focus. The text will move slightly as well, and it will move in and out and side to side. So if this is hard enough for you to try to read, right? And you probably want to look out the window right now too.
I sort of do, yes.
Imagine it moving.
Yes, my eyes are tracking, and they're trying to figure it out, which is a strain on the adrenals and everything. Yeah.
Absolutely, exactly. So remember back to the slide with the list of symptoms I showed you a little while ago?
Yes.
You may have noticed that some of the symptoms on that list also occur with other conditions. And this is because many symptoms of vision-related learning problems can overlap with other conditions, including ADHD and dyslexia.
Wow.
So how can you know what
Right.
is really going on?
Yes. Tell us, please.
In the book, in the book, I don't have them here on the slides, but in the book there are 2 charts that give the listings of all of these symptoms and show the overlap. But I will tell you that, and the question, of course, is, well, how do you know, and then how easy is it to misdiagnose a child? Right. If a comprehensive visual exam is not part of the evaluation. And it's very easy when you think about the fact that 15 of the 18 symptoms of ADHD and 13 of the 17 symptoms of dyslexia can also be present with a vision disorder. Okay?
Wow.
And there are then consequently countless numbers of kids who are classified as special education students or who are medicated or both.
Yes.
Who may be wrongly diagnosed. Now, this is not always the case. It may be that a child has ADHD or dyslexia, or it may be this in disguise, or it may be a combination of both. But it's very important to understand that the vision piece is so influential that to leave it left undiagnosed and untreated will limit the effectiveness of other therapies and intervention put into action to try to help that child. It is that important.
Of course, yeah.
And there's no other way to compensate for that. If it's not treated, a child is only going to be able to get so far, even with all the other pieces in place to help them. And as it was, I think we mentioned this when you were introducing this this webinar, that few people are aware that that a breakdown in the visual system could be at the core of a learning disability.
Yes.
People wouldn't think that it's vision related, and because of this, the potential for misdiagnosis is enormous. And this is tragic.
It's tragic is the word to use there. Yes.
And it is avoidable.
And it's avoidable, yeah.
This needs to become common knowledge.
Yes.
Right now, it's hit or miss. Okay.
I'm confused. May I just ask you a question, Wendy? So, well, if a child is showing signs of some sort of learning, let's just say it's a learning disability, I would have thought that testing their eyes would be a kind of a natural course of action. But if they're only testing their eyes with a conventional optometrist, they would not be picking up on what you're talking about. Is that correct?
Yes. And well, so there's a difference between a comprehensive vision exam and the regular vision exam. And I'm going to touch on that in a moment. I'm going to explain the current method that we're using and how it's inadequate and why it's inadequate.
Okay.
By now, I mean, it's clear to me you are already gaining an appreciation for the subtitle of this book, right?
Yes.
Why millions of learning disabled children are misdiagnosed.
Yes.
This is not an exaggeration. And it's not worded dramatically just to get people's attention. It is literal.
Wow.
And this knowledge isn't being called groundbreaking and life-changing just on a whim. It truly is.
Yes.
And it holds the potential to change not only individual lives, but it will have an enormous impact on a societal level as well. And here's
Absolutely.
why. Here is some alarming information. Vision-related learning problems are present in three-quarters of the juvenile delinquent population,
Wow.
and roughly the same in the prisoner population and illiterate adults.
Wow.
So when these problems go unrecognized and untreated, lives can spiral downward. You know, kids who are trying really hard and just nothing is working for them. You know, they're falling through the cracks. They start to give up on themselves. Their self-esteem plummets, and we know what happens. You know, they go down the wrong path. They're just trying to survive, and
Yes. Yeah.
unfortunately, they can wind up in the JD system and in the legal system. This is so important, by the way. I've devoted a whole chapter to discussing it because this subject must be part of the criminal justice system
Yes.
reform conversation.
Yes. That
Okay.
along with, and I have to just throw this out there, feeding them proper nutritious food, right?
Yes. Yes. That's another big piece.
Crazy.
Nutrition and wellness. Yes.
Exactly. How
Yes.
can you expect anybody to get better if you're not providing them with nutrient dense food for their brain?
Exactly. Exactly. That's a very good point. Thank you for adding that.
Mhm.
So the question comes up all the time, and I asked the same question initially. If these problems are so common, why are so few people aware of them?
Mm.
Now, the first explanation I can offer is that vision problems are inherently difficult to recognize, given that they are most often hidden. When a child exhibits a speech problem, we can hear it.
Mm.
But think about it. We have no way of knowing what the world looks like to a child.
Mm-hmm.
And they typically don't question what they are seeing. They
Right.
typically think this is just the way everybody sees.
Mm-hmm.
It is highly unusual for a child to articulate how they see, let alone describe any symptoms that may offer clues about why they are having such a hard time in school. It's happened to me on 3 occasions. These stories are in the book, actually,
Mm-hmm.
and it's very powerful to just hear the perspective of a child. And of course, knowing this, I can pick up on it. But if you don't know about this, you might not. You know, you might just think, oh, they're whatever. It's just not going to be. It's not going to resonate. So the second reason that I can offer is that there haven't been enough easily accessible resources available to educate folks about this. While there are wonderful materials out there, I mean, this isn't the first book written on this. There are many wonderful materials out there, but many of them are geared for professionals. But there hasn't been as much available to the general population. And this is another reason I wrote this book. Okay, this book is
Yes.
out there for everyone. All right.
Yes. Yes.
Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about the question you brought up about how vision is evaluated. Presently, visual skills are not routinely and comprehensively examined to assess for any visual deficits that could interfere with a child's ability to learn. These skills are not evaluated in the typical vision screening that utilizes only the Snellen eye chart, and they often go unchecked. So the Snellen eye chart is that big eye chart we see in doctors' offices and school nurses' offices with the big E at the top.
Right.
Okay, that eye chart was invented in 1862.
Oh, brother.
Okay, by a Dutch ophthalmologist by the name of Dr. Herman Snellen. Okay, so 1862.
Wow.
This method only identifies how well we see at a distance of 20 feet.
Mm.
That's it. Now, where's most work done? Close up, right?
Close up. Yes.
Okay, and are you ready for this?
Yeah.
This method identifies only 5% of vision problems in children.
Wow.
So we come away with a very limited understanding of a child's visual story. And we are therefore missing critical information about a child's readiness for school, right? A child can
Right.
have 20/20 eyesight and still have a vision problem
Right. Okay.
that, as you now know, can be at the
Yes.
core of a learning problem.
Yes.
So we have a whole category of vision problems that many people are unaware of, and we have an incomplete understanding of what vision really is. And this gives rise to substantial limitations. Okay, we need to
Uh-huh.
become vision literate. And we also need progressive change on a systemic level so that
Mhm.
every child can receive a comprehensive vision examination prior to entering school and
Yes.
then yearly. And this type of exam evaluates these other visual skills that are critical for learning and would go very far in catching these problems and treating them early
Mm.
and avoiding the inevitable downward spiral and struggles that so many kids are grappling with.
Mhm.
And so vision exams vary, and some are more comprehensive than others. Right now, only 14% of children are getting this type of exam by the time they enter first grade. It's been mandated in 3 states
Mm.
that I know of, and it's being worked on in a couple of other states currently. But we need a universal method for comprehensively examining children's vision that would serve as the new gold standard and that would ensure that every child receives the correct diagnosis and help where it's needed.
Right. Yes.
So
Absolutely.
we are on it, and many are working on this effort, but we need to make significant progress on several interdisciplinary fronts. Certainly education, but
Mhm.
also healthcare and policy. Vision resides in all of these realms. This knowledge will change children's lives. And I would like to roll out the red carpet and extend an invitation to you to share to all of you to share any expertise and energy if you feel inspired and inclined to help move this effort forward. This connects to so many other areas and is, I believe, the next frontier in fixing many problems that are burdening our society. And
Mhm.
it begins with education.
Mm.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
I promised you resources. Here we go.
Okay.
If you would like to learn more about behavioral optometry and uh, find a behavioral optometrist, if anyone out there is concerned about a child in your life, you can find all of that information on this first set of websites. The 3 listed Find a Practitioner here will take you uh, to there's a link to find one by geography, so you can find one near where you live. If you would like to read my book or tell anyone else about my book, it can be purchased on these 3 websites, Roman.com, that's the publisher, Roman and Littlefield, as well as Amazon and Barnes and Noble. And if you'd like to read reviews and some media sources and check out other links or contact me, you can go on my website, which is wendybethrosen.com. I'm in the process of reworking it, so it might change its look
Mhm.
over the
Okay.
course of the next couple of weeks, but it'll be there. And you can email me through that site as well if you would like to be in touch. I can't talk about this subject enough. I
Mm.
could talk about it in my sleep. It's so important.
Right.
And thank you so much for tuning in. And I'm happy to answer any questions that anyone
Okay.
might have.
Well, thank you, Wendy. That this is just oh wow, so important, and it is so important to make this information available to everybody. That, and also the testing to be available to everybody. I don't know if there's if it's covered by insurance or if it's cost prohibitive or any of those things, but um, and I think you alluded earlier that maybe there were not. Are there many behavioral optometrists?
So they're not on every corner,
No.
but they are out there.
Okay.
You have to, again, depending on where you live, just look up by zip code to see, who is available. I do know that, um, sometimes it does mean traveling a little bit to get to somebody.
Right.
But I'll tell you that I look back on this process, and we had to travel a little bit as well. Um, I can't even sum up its worth.
Oh, boy.
I can't even, like I said, I couldn't imagine if we had never found it, this information, and it turned Sarah's life around,
Yes.
literally. But I can't sum up how worthwhile it was. All that trekking that we did, the time, it was not easy, but I can't highlight enough how worth it
Uh,
was.
Absolutely. And we're
It was
so
life
grateful that
changing.
you did it, that you're doing this groundbreaking work and bringing this forward. It's heartbreaking when I think about how many children may be suffering from this, and they're classified or put on medication, and you just see their lives sort of um, go in a very, very bad direction.
Yes.
I could see
Yes.
that this would lead to substance abuse, and
Yes.
which leads to prison and incarceration, all of that. So if this were in place, uh, imagine what our society would look like, for one,
Exactly.
and the amount of savings to the healthcare system, and just the number of lives, families' lives that would be changed by this.
Right. And that's a good point when you brought up savings to the healthcare system.
Right.
If this could become, universal, and if there was coverage, think about all the other resources that parents and teachers wouldn't need for kids, that are being paid for, that aren't solving the problem.
Exactly. Right.
Okay?
Right. And
How much money is being spent by school districts to provide special education services for kids, and even ship kids out of district sometimes, which is another cost,
right.
when it's not solving the problem, you
Right.
know? So in
Right.
terms of a savings, that, it's about redistributing our resources based on what, knowing that these needs are out there and addressing them. So it is, as I said before, it really is game changing. And again, the potential for how it could impact us on a societal level is enormous.
Absolutely. Yeah. You're talking about um, uh, productive human beings, productive adults,
Hmm.
moving into their full potential versus not being able to get anywhere in their life. And that also becomes I don't want to use the word burden, but on the whole system, from healthcare to the judicial system, just to the family system, like it's just a complete breakdown.
Right, exactly. And this also affects the economy.
Yes, of course. Yeah.
So this is all, by the way, laid out in much greater detail in the book. I know we're kind of past our 45 minutes here.
Yes, I'm so sorry for
No,
that.
no, this is great. But I mean, I know that if I start talking,
Okay, well, we'll get to some questions.
I will. No, no. I mean, it's going to take up more time, and it's in the book. This is all in the
Okay.
book. But I'm
Mhm.
happy to answer questions if there are any.
Yes, there are. So we have Hayford. He says, "Hi, everyone. I'm Hayford, and he's partaking live in Ghana."
Wow. Hi there.
And his question is, what other vision problems apart from CI also impair learning ability?
Wow. Okay. So there are quite a few. Um, they are. They're all laid out in the book, but I can just quickly mention a few of them. And again, it's pretty complex to go through all of them, but I can talk about a couple here. So I'm going to mention one which is called focus accommodation, which is a problem whereby and it's interesting because Sarah's teachers were saying that they thought she was having a focusing problem, and she actually literally did have a focusing
Mhm.
problem. Focus accommodation was another one of the deficits that she had. And this is when someone has difficulty adjusting their focus from near point distances to far distances, back and forth efficiently. So in other words, a child who's looking down at their desk, reading a book or doing written work, and then having to look up at, I was going to say a chalkboard, but I'm dating myself. We're talking about the smart boards, but no, I mean, depending, I personally love chalkboards. So looking out into the distance at a chalkboard, at a whiteboard, at a smart board, and then back and forth. If they're not able to focus or to accommodate those focal lengths efficiently, they're going to get tripped up. Okay. So that's one example. We'll talk about, I can go back to that slide actually where we have the categories of visual skills. And actually, I'm going to go back one further. So visual motor integration, okay, at the bottom there, gross motor eye-body coordination and fine motor eye-body coordination. This is an example of how vision is intertwined with our whole body and our whole functioning. If the visual system, the visual wiring in the brain is not as it should be with that, where it connects with the motor channels in the brain, this can impact coordination. So for example, when you have a child who we say that this child is so clumsy, they're constantly tripping over their own feet, they're bumping into walls, they're knocking things over, that child may actually have a visual motor integration problem that is playing out on a gross motor scale. Okay. This can play out with, as I mentioned too before, with handwriting, being able to do, more, finer kinds of motions. Okay.
Okay.
You want one more?
That's up to you.
Okay. Just because there's a lot. But let me just mention, let's see, what would be a good one to quickly go into. So let's talk about a visual memory weakness. Okay, we use our visual memory to remember the alphabet, to learn basic math facts, to read and spell words that are not spelled phonetically. Okay, when we have to, memorize sort of a funky spelling for something that doesn't, make sense to us, that's where we use our visual memory skills. And if those are weak, child's going to have trouble remembering the alphabet, learning those facts, and retaining that information about spelling difficult words. Okay, so those are a few.
Yeah. Okay.
Does
Great.
Does that help?
Yes, that's very helpful. Thank you very much. So we also have a question from Sarah. She says, "Hi, Wendy." Actually, two questions. She says, "Any chance of getting a picture of the cow?" And then somebody did answer and tell her that the PowerPoint presentation will be available. I don't know if the picture of the cow is something you can send or.
So you know what? The picture of the cow is actually in the book.
Oh, okay. So get the book, guys.
So I didn't mean for that to sound like a selling point, but I'm telling you this.
To get this book.
Right. Well, thank you. But I'm telling you that because that's where it's available. It's here in this presentation, which will be available. But in terms of, I would have to check about permission rights and all of that.
Gotcha.
So it was. I acquired permission to have it printed in the book, so it is accessible through my book and as well as this presentation. Okay.
All right, great. And so Sarah also asks, the stat about Snellen acuity identifies only 5%. Where did that come from? And she says, "Thank you."
Oh, you are most welcome. Where does that come from? A little unclear. The stat or the?
I think she's asking. The question says the stat about Snellen acuity.
Okay. Snellen acuity. So those are two words that are kind of being combined. They're two different things. That's why I guess I'm having a little trouble understanding the question.
Okay. Well, Sarah, if you're still listening, if you want to clarify the question for Wendy.
I think my understanding was, where did the stat come from? To be honest, so this is that it was developed in 1862 is the question. If that is the question,
Okay.
I'll tell you that's sort of, you can go out there and Google this and you'll come up with that. The actual source, if I were to give you that source, I'd have to go look it up in my files, to be honest with you.
Okay.
But that's, that's fact that's out there. The acuity part of the question, I didn't quite grasp.
Okay.
So.
Okay, so Sarah is writing in. She says she's an optometrist. She said she's wondering where you got the 5% statistic, and then she says no. The question is about 5% of children. Not sure if that makes it any clearer for you, Wendy.
Not really. What is 5% of children?
I don't know. That's just what she wrote here. Wondering where you got the 5% statistic.
Okay, so I honestly
in your research.
So it's all in my research.
Gotcha. Okay.
And that source, I'd have to look it up because it's not just off the top of my head. But Sarah, if you want to email me, I'm happy to continue the dialogue and we can go through that further, rather than me taking the time to pull out the file now, because I don't think they want to use the time. But I'm happy to talk more about that with you.
Okay, Sarah.
So go on my website and send me an email. We can go from there.
Okay. And as Sarah says, thank you. She'll follow up. And one last comment from Hayford. He says, thanks so much, Wendy. I'm an optometry student and will be doing my final year project on this subject. I love it.
Wow.
I know.
That's you. I got chills.
I got tears in my eyes. That is so wonderful.
Wow. Thank you so much for tuning in and for your question, and good luck and all the best to you. I'm thrilled to hear that. I really have chills from head to toe.
Yes, me too. One last question, Kate, just popped in if you want to take it.
Sure.
Okay. You said the Snellen method only identifies 5%. We're back to that 5% of the vision problems in children. Well, where did that statistic come from? So Wendy has already answered that she would need to look in her research. If you want to contact her via her website, via email, Nancy, Wendy, you'll be able to maybe follow up on that conversation.
I'm happy to provide that source for you. So again, I don't have it right off the top of my head, but I'll go back and look it up, and I'll be happy to get that to you.
Great.
Okay.
Well, thank you so much for the work you're doing, for the tenacity and what it took to get this information, and to bring it forward, and just what you're doing. And
well,
I certainly will be posting it and putting the information out there, purchasing my book, and I just it's just fantastic and hopeful.
Well, thank you so much, Leisha, for your interest in this subject and for inviting me to do this webinar. I'm so thrilled to be able to share this information. And now you know why.
Yes, now I know why. Yes.
Out there, and so many kids need this help, and don't know it. So I'm very appreciative and grateful for your interest. So thank you, and thank you everybody for tuning in.
Yes, thank you everybody. So I just have to do some closing comments, Wendy. If you want to put your last slide on.
Sure.
So people maybe want to jot down, although the information will be made available in a day or so. Somebody, Suzanne McKay, wrote she's purchasing the book tonight. Thank you.
All right. That's wonderful.
Okay. So thank you, everybody. This has been just wonderful information. So glad you were able to join us, and just fantastic. So join us next month, February 22nd. Our presenter will be Deb Freeman, a EgoSQ University Certified Postural Alignment Specialist. She'll be discussing eliminating chronic and recurrent pain with posture therapy. Posture therapy is a non-medical modality which utilizes a series of gentle, individualized exercises and stretches to target the underlying root cause of pain. So that should be interesting. So as you know, your confidence in us is our highest compliment. If you find value in our webinars and our services, please leave us a positive review on Google or Facebook. I guess that's everything for this evening. Again, Wendy, thank you. Thank you for everybody who joined us. Wishing everybody a pleasant and wonderful evening. Good night, everyone.
Most welcome, and thank you. Good night.